DHT. It's one of the primary drivers of hair loss in men, and reducing DHT is the most effective way to combat hair loss long term. But what if you don't want to use a DHT reducer? Or maybe you can't tolerate things like finasteride, dutasteride, or even natural options like saw palmetto. Are you destined to go bald? In this video, we're going to answer that question. We're also going to dive into 6 evidence-based ways to fight hair loss even without touching your male hormones. So if you're looking for options outside of DHT blockers, you are in the right place. I'm Rob English. I'm a consumer advocate. I'm a researcher who focuses on hair loss disorders. I'm on the editorial board of a dermatology journal, and I run the website Perfect Hair Health. It's a site that's dedicated to prioritizing hair loss education over product purchases. We use step-by-step frameworks to help people unlock new levels of hair growth. So check out our free resources, check out our free articles, check out our success stories, and see if there is anything that we can do to help make your hair growth journey a bit easier. We're about to dive into 6 ways to address hair loss without lowering DHT. And just as important, I'm also going to tell you which interventions you may want to avoid, because what's on this list is just as important as what we're going to leave out. Now, every week I see some new study about some non-hormonal ingredient for hair growth. Maybe it's an extract or an amino acid or perhaps a special sugar. And there's always a company marketing that ingredient in their product line as its differentiating point, often with some before and after photos that generally are probably ripped from social sites from users who weren't even using that specific intervention. And of course, many of the alleged hair growth studies that they use to support these products, they often have design flaws, they were tested in petri dishes or mice, not men, or for one reason or another, they just don't translate to real world consumers who are going to try that product and be disappointed by their experience. And for countless examples of this, see our feature-length video, Why is the Hair Loss Industry Broken? But these products, they crop up for one big reason. They're trying to cater to people who don't want to use DHT reducers to fight hair loss. Things like finasteride, dutasteride, or even saw palmetto. And most people don't want to use these things because they either tried them in the past and they got side effects, or they worry about trying them and getting side effects. So they never ever start them in the first place. This then leads these individuals to bounce from product to product, based on whatever they're advertised on Instagram. They test different ingredients, often getting ambiguous results, and in the end, they hemorrhage thousands of dollars and years of wasted time and energy and no hair to show for it without any results whatsoever. This video is here to stop the madness. I'm gonna lay out what our team sees as the absolute best hair growth interventions that do not touch that hormone DHT, or androgens really, in any meaningful way. With this video, you are never going to need to guess about that next supplement that you see, or that topical or nutraceutical that advertises your way. I'm going to lay out a roadmap for you, so there's no need to wonder if that product advertised has ingredients that will actually work. These interventions, in my opinion, represent the absolute best ways to approach targeting hair loss without lowering that specific hormone DHT, all according to the quality of their evidence, their regrowth potential, and their long-term viability, also called safety. And if you want to learn more about how we score these metrics based on clinical studies, check out our page on treatment metrics. I will link it below. So without further ado, let's get into 6 ways to fight hair loss without lowering DHT. Step number 1, make sure you actually have a good reason for avoiding DHT reducers. DHT reducers, like finasteride, are the gold standard treatment for androgenic alopecia or pattern hair loss. Over 2-year time periods, they can slow, stop, or partially reverse hair loss in 80 to 90% of the men who use them. So if you're not using those, you really have to be asking yourself why. And if the reason why is that you've gotten side effects from these things in the past, you can often actually manage those side effects or even eliminate them entirely with dose titrations or formulation changes. And if you don't know about this, you should give it a go. So watch our videos on topical finasteride, watch our videos about how to fix hair loss in men for plenty of strategies here. And if you haven't started any DHT reducers due to concerns of side effects, I also totally understand that. But when you have a moment, watch our video on cognitive dissonance bred through asymmetrical information exposure in the hair loss industry. And yes, I get that that's a mouthful, but what I'm basically saying is oftentimes I find that people who are not using finasteride due to concerns of side effects are in many cases simultaneously taking things like multivitamins or extracts and supplements that come with an actual higher risk of the same side effects that they're trying to avoid with finasteride. So that is a form of cognitive dissonance, and it's driven because you don't have access to the full information on what you're putting into your body. So make sure to watch those videos, check them out, and also check out our free articles about these topics on the incidence of finasteride-related side effects, its effects on fertility, all of that. So watch that video and make sure that you are aware of these things. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get into alternative approaches to tackling hair loss without lowering DHT. And when I say hair loss, again, I am specifically talking about androgenic alopecia, or male and female pattern hair loss. This is one of the most common hair loss disorders in the world. It's chronic, progressive. It looks like this in men. It looks like this in women. And that is the subject of today's video. How do we improve those specific conditions? Option number one, Minoxidil. Minoxidil is not a DHT reducer. Even still, it helps to promote new hair growth, hair counts, and hair thickness. It's suspected to work through vasodilation and also the promotion of angiogenesis, or new blood vessels, in areas that support the hair follicles. And clinical studies show that it can regrow hair in both the short term and the long term. And it's also backed by years of safety data, which is why the 2% and the 5% formulations of Minoxidil, they're so safe that they're sold over the counter in most drugstores. The only real issue with Minoxidil is, unfortunately, by itself, it just isn't super effective. Real-world studies show that it regrows hair in maybe 40 to 60% of users tops, and within a year of use, there's a study showing that 95% of people will eventually quit within that year, with 2/3 of them citing low effect as their rationale. The good news is that we know the reason why this is the case. Topical minoxidil has both a penetration problem and an activation problem. It has a really hard time reaching the hair follicles, and of the minoxidil that does reach the hair follicles, many of us lack the enzymes needed to activate that minoxidil so it can attach to the hair follicle sites and then have a positive impact on our hair. So if this is you, for this situation, we actually have 4 solutions. The first is that you can just increase the dose of topical minoxidil beyond 5%, maybe 7%, 8%, which would help to expose more minoxidil into these scalp zones and maybe improve efficacy. The second option is that you can combine minoxidil with another ingredient, retinoic acid, also known as tretinoin. Studies show that this greatly enhances the penetration and the activation of minoxidil, and also, as a consequence, the hair gains that you're going to get. Then you can also try adding in something called microneedling. Microneedling devices puncture little holes into the scalp, they create acute inflammation, and they may not only promote hair growth on their own, but they also help to increase both the penetration and the activation of things like minoxidil, with some studies showing up to 2 to 4 times more hair regrowth with people combining minoxidil and microneedling versus just using minoxidil alone. For more information on this, watch our videos diving into our microneedling literature review, which we published in a dermatology journal. Watch our updated video recently on the best needling length, and then also watch our video on how to fix hair loss in men. And the fourth option is you can switch from topical minoxidil to oral minoxidil, which might help to solve both that penetration issue and that activation issue that is faced by topical minoxidil users. Now, we won't cover oral minoxidil in depth in this video, but the short answer is that I think currently the best balance between safety and efficacy in terms of dosing in men appears to be somewhere around 2.5 milligram doses daily, and perhaps split between half in the morning, half in the night, and perhaps also favoring sublingual delivery. But again, we're going to get into that in later videos. And if you do end up trying topical minoxidil, one of the downsides is that it can sometimes cause skin irritation in a small portion of users, but it's not actually from the minoxidil itself in most cases. It's actually from an ingredient called propylene glycol. So if this skin irritation pops up for you, if that's an issue, look for a propylene glycol free formulation of topical minoxidil. There are a lot out there. Next up, we have Cetirizine. Cetirizine, again, it's not a DHT reducer. It's actually an antihistamine, and it's often purchased over the counter as an oral medication to help reduce hay fever symptoms. You might have heard of Zyrtec. That is the branded version of Cetirizine. But topical Cetirizine also has these anti-inflammatory effects that, when applied on balding scalps, may make it actually useful for hair regrowth, especially in the context of androgenic alopecia. More than 6 clinical studies have all demonstrated that Cetirizine appears to not only have a great safety profile when applied topically, but it also seems to regrow hair in a lot of participants, even within the ballpark of responders to topical minoxidil. The major issue with Cetirizine is that, at least the way that I see it, it's kind of a hit or miss topical. While studies show an improvement to hair counts on average and really impressive before and after photos from select participants, when you look at the individual self-assessment data for topical Cetirizine users, it's as if 30 to 50% of the users think it works amazingly, and then the remainder thinks it doesn't really work at all. So why might this be the case? Well, there is a scalp biopsy study that showed that around 30 to 50% of people with androgenic alopecia have inflammation in their scalps in the form of mast cell degranulation, which is related to a histamine-like response. And interestingly, this is the kind of inflammation that topical Cetirizine might help to target. So if you have that kind of scalp inflammation, maybe 30% of you, 50% of you, topical Cetirizine is a game changer. But if you don't, maybe you find the topical underwhelming. But for those with hay fever or who suspect that they might have this kind of scalp inflammation, topical Cetirizine could be a meaningful addition to your treatment arsenal, especially as it fits with the goals of this video, which is really just to fight hair loss without touching that hormone DHT. Now, one challenge with topical Cetirizine is that it's not really widely accessible, meaning that even despite this medication being approved for over-the-counter use orally, for people with hay fever, and even with 6+ studies on it demonstrating that topical Cetirizine shows hair growth benefits in people with androgenic alopecia, and it has a great safety profile so far, it's not yet an ingredient that's widely adopted in the telehealth market space for people looking for custom topicals. Now, one of the reasons we co-founded our telehealth brand, Ulo, was in part to create a service that would offer ingredients like this to hair loss sufferers, pending a doctor's assessment and depending on your eligibility. So check out Ulo, see the offerings, see if something like topical Cetirizine alongside maybe Minoxidil, retinoic acid, and a host of other hair growth promoting ingredients topically might be right for you. And if you live in the US, you can learn more about that in the link below and connect with one of our partner physicians for an assessment. We will never guarantee a prescription, but you might learn that you're a candidate for products like that. Next up, we have caffeine. Applied at doses of 0.2% up to 1%, topical caffeine has actually been shown to stimulate hair growth in a series of small studies, one of which found similar efficacy between 0.2% caffeine and 5% minoxidil. If you're curious about the data here, we dove into this in our videos about Brian Johnson's hair growth topical and in our video about green tea extracts, which also happens to contain caffeine. I'll link those videos below. You can review the data. In general, we think that it presents with this regrowth potential, this evidence quality, and this safety profile. So make of that what you will. We think it's a lower leverage intervention overall, but maybe combined with other ingredients, it could help. And along those same lines, melatonin topically may also play a role in hair growth, especially for people with androgenic alopecia. A series of small studies have also shown that topical melatonin at doses of 0.1 milligrams daily up to 1 milligrams daily not only helps to reduce shedding rates, but it also helps to promote new hair growth within the study time periods. And doses of 0.1 milligrams per day also seem to promote that hair growth without actually altering your blood levels of melatonin, so you're not going to have interference with wakefulness or sleep quality in those cases most likely. If you want to learn more about melatonin, check out the links below. Next, if you have something like androgenic alopecia, but you also have scalp oiliness, scalp dandruff, or even in some cases, things like seborrheic dermatitis, anti-dandruff shampoos, we're talking puroctone, olamine, or zinc pyrithione, these are worth considering because these ingredients, they not only help to reduce those symptoms, which can help to keep your scalp environment a little bit more conducive toward hair growth, but they also may actually increase hair counts for people with dandruff associated with hair loss. And here we'll also give an honorable mention to ketoconazole shampoo. That's an antifungal medication that, when used orally, does reduce DHT levels, so it hasn't made our list. But as a shampoo, it doesn't seem to have any systemic hormonal effects, and it absolutely can improve hair loss parameters for people with androgenic alopecia and telogen effluvium associated with dandruff. And if you want to learn more about that, check out our video on ketoconazole. Okay, a few more honorable mentions. There are a couple of naturally derived ingredients that we might want to discuss further. We have articles on all these, so check out the links. Cannabidiol or CBD, adenosine, L-Carnitine, and certain plant extracts like Sanguisorba officinalis. These things, they seem to have some very limited levels of support for hair regrowth in humans with androgenic alopecia. However, again, the quality of studies here, they're incredibly low. And when this occurs, we often see a huge discrepancy in whatever the study results are reporting versus the real world experiences of people who try those ingredients or try those products containing those ingredients. Again, to understand why this is the case, watch our video on the importance of evidence quality, watch our video on how companies cheat hair count analyses, and even read our articles on these ingredients. We have articles about CBD, we have articles about sugars, we have articles about all these other ingredients and have run little mini literature reviews about them inside of our ingredients database. So check out those links. Again, they are below if you want to explore further. But my current take is that you should consider these things as adjuvants to better supported treatments. All right, we've talked about things worth exploring from a non-DHT reducing perspective. Now let's talk about things worth avoiding, because I told you that this list is just as much about what's left in as what's left out. And if you are a follower of our work, you've probably heard of some of these before. First thing I think is worth avoiding is platelet-rich plasma, or PRP. You can think of PRP as one of these cash cow interventions that dermatologists are going to offer you. And they're going to make it sound so enticing when you sit down into the chair and they pitch it to you. It's an injection of your own centrifuged blood, the platelets at the very edges of this spinning machine that collect. They take those, they inject them into your scalp, and then there's evidence to suggest that these types of exercises are actually going to regrow your hair. And it's only going to cost $1,200 to $1,500, and you're going to have to repeat it once every 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, indefinitely. And it is true that studies do support PRP usage. But here's what the dermatologist is not going to tell you. There are comparative studies on PRP versus microneedling. And both comparative studies that exist show exactly the same results. So more or less, these injections of PRP with all this fancy fluid that's derived autologously from your own body, that confers no additional benefit versus just the insertion of the needle itself into the scalp and the acute inflammation that that brings, which also, as a consequence, brings the same growth factors and platelets that localize and stay longer. And the reasons why PRP is probably not worth it is because when you inject that needle and then you inject the PRP, the scalp is hypervascularized. PRP and related materials are hydrophilic. In other words, they love water, and they're going to escape back into the bloodstream and travel systemically within hours to days after those injections. You can confer the same exact mechanism by just injuring the skin itself. And in fact, with the injury, that inflammation is prolonged until it's resolved. So, what would you rather do? These expensive injections or microneedling by itself? For me, the answer would be microneedling, but for you, you could have a different opinion. If you want to learn more about this, we've written a ton. I'm not even kidding. Check out our articles on PRP versus microneedling. Check out the studies that we cite. Check out our video presentation on this topic. I'll link all of these below. Next up, low-level laser therapy. Laser caps and laser devices are all the rage right now. And you can't blame consumers for wanting to buy into these things. I mean, when you look at these websites, you hear terms like clinically supported. You see sometimes companies will include hair count improvements, and then they'll disingenuously compare those hair count improvements from their own laser therapy device to what something like Finasteride or Minoxidil might prove in the same time period. And they won't tell you that the comparisons come from totally different studies on totally different participants with totally different hair count starting points and totally different hair count percentage changes. So what's the takeaway here? Well, I won't deny that low-level laser therapy has a lot of well-designed clinical support, but I am mentioning it as something worth avoiding because in my 10 years of running our website and of the thousands of one-on-one calls that I have had with individuals, I have found that maybe 5 people have reported some potential benefit for low-level laser therapy as a monotherapy, meaning it's the only thing that they're doing, and none of them could produce a single before and after photo to show for it. When I look at the before and after results inside the clinical studies on low-level laser therapy, you don't really see results. In fact, it's rare to see a before and after photo inside these studies demonstrating cosmetic levels of regrowth. I think that most of the regrowth here is at a microscopic level. It doesn't actually improve hair density, hair volume overall. The long-term studies are lacking, and at the price investment that these companies ask of you, I have yet to see a good argument that that investment is worth its cost in hair recovery. So this is a case where the clinical study results absolutely exist. And on paper, low-level laser therapy looks amazing. But the real-world data does not add up to the real-world experiences of people trying that product. And I just want you to know that because I remain hopeful that low-level laser therapy will advance and more people will get better results and those consumer reports will improve. But as it stands right now, I think these devices are a little overpriced and not worth your time. But again, this is just my opinion. Another ingredient that you might want to potentially avoid is Latanoprost. Now, Latanoprost was originally used as a glaucoma drug, but then it was repurposed when it was found that some users of Latanoprost for eye drops were noticing elongated eyelashes. It's been tested in alopecia areata, it's been tested in androgenic alopecia, it's been tested in combination hair loss types, androgenic alopecia plus telogen effluvium. There's some very limited data supporting Latanoprost as a hair growth intervention. And right now it's being used pretty widely amongst telehealth brands that want to capture the attention of Latanoprost and market that as a unique differentiating point. So all this sounds great. Why don't we recommend Latanoprost? Well, it's because of the long-term concerns that we have for safety. Latanoprost doses at 0.005%, with just a couple of those drops added to your eye on a daily basis, are safe for most people up until about a year. And then after about a year of use, 10% of people noticed permanent iris darkening that doesn't reverse when you stop using Latanoprost. So it changes the color of your eyes from whatever color they currently are to a more blackened version. And that is an effect that does not reverse. And the doses that are currently being used in hair growth topicals here are far, far higher than the doses that are causing those eyelash changes. Now, has Latanoprost been proven out to not cause this effect as a topical when applied for hair growth versus eye drops? The answer is no, it hasn't. In fact, the longest running study on Latanoprost topically was just 9 months, not even up to that 12-month window where this side effect starts to actually manifest. And because of that unknown, I don't like recommending it to people. I think that it could be potentially dangerous. And when there comes a risk of long-term permanent side effects, I start to grow a little bit concerned and I start to say, why don't we just wait for a little bit better data? And after all, the guys who we know and the women that we know who are using Latanoprost topically, it's really an incremental product at best. It's not like it's accounting for the hair growth of Minoxidil alongside retinoic acid or Finasteride. It's kind of like on the category of saw palmetto, melatonin, caffeine as a monotherapy. So is it really worth that much of a tiny incremental improvement to your hair for this massive unknown? Again, I'm not going to make that decision for you. You can make it for yourself. But right now, it's something that I personally would like to avoid. So what is the takeaway here? Well, DHT reduction through finasteride, dutasteride, these things remain the most effective long-term strategies for hair gains. And it's generally the one that's going to maximize your treatment responses. But if these are not options for you, there are alternatives. In fact, studies show that treatments like Minoxidil, which again doesn't reduce DHT, can even keep your hair above baseline for 5 years, perhaps even longer. So my advice is the more of these options that you combine together, the better your results might be. But you have to look at each of these individually as very incremental. And what I mean by that is, say that you wanted to go and build muscle at the gym, so you bought a stack of supplements and exercised really hard for a 6-month period. You might get 3% more muscle density, 5% more muscle density. or you could go and take steroids and probably get 25% more muscle density for a fraction of the effort. So when you compare those two things together, one is really moving the needle and a bunch of them are probably only helping a tiny, tiny bit. And of course, I'm not advocating that anybody get steroids. This is just me illustrating an example of how we need to think about similar concepts in the realm of hair loss treatments. So things that don't target DHT, a lot of times they are incremental in nature. There's some data on things like Minoxidil that suggest that these things can work in the long term, and that's amazing. And if we can stay above baseline without reducing DHT, especially for guys who can't tolerate those DHT reducers or can't use them for one reason or another, that is a huge win. Just so long as you understand the relative differences in trying all of these things combined versus DHT reducers. The options we discussed here, a more subtle impact, DHT reducers, a more long-term sustainable and larger impact on average. So that is it. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check out all of the videos, the articles, the resources that we referenced in this video for a deeper dive into the actual science and the studies. I hope that this helps. We will see you next time.